With tricks ranging from risky bow and arrow stunts to swallowing the seemingly impossible, let's pull back the curtain on some of the world's most dangerous magic tricks. One of the most famous tricks of all time, this escape from a watery grave has kept audiences on the edge of their seats since Harry Houdini debuted it in 1911. It begins with a magician wearing handcuffs, placing their ankles into a metal square with closing doors, which the assistant secures shut around the magician's ankles with padlocks. The contraption is then raised into the air, magician included, via attached chains, then lowered into a glass tank filled with water. The lid is locked in place, and the magician is left to escape the tank before drowning. At this point, a curtain is brought around the glass to preserve the mystery. After some time, the curtain is partially raised, revealing the magician thrashing around inside. Just as the onlookers begin to grow uneasy, the curtain drops, revealing the trickster proudly standing atop the water tank. So how did they escape? Well, a magician never reveals his tricks, but I do. For starters, the performer must remain calm during the trick. This lowers his heart rate, making holding his breath easier and reducing the odds of passing out while upside down. But the real trick lies in the lid to which the magician's feet are secured. The padlocks securing the doors shut are very real, but as they're locked in place, the assistant slides out the bolts from the fastening hinges on the lid. Now, even with the padlocks on, the lid can be opened. When the curtain hides the tank, the magician uses a hidden handle to pull themselves up, open the doors, and take a breath. Then they return underwater, in time for the curtain to raise slightly, revealing them pretending to struggle. Then the curtain's re-lowered, and the magician pulls off their handcuffs, which are rigged to open easily. Then they open the ankle doors again, this time grabbing the chains to pull themselves out. Into position for the big reveal. The curtain rises, and the audience is amazed. This classic trick has a real element of danger. It involves a magician's assistant climbing inside a cardboard box, which is then pierced by several spears. These spears are stabbed through at various angles with alarming speed. But just as the audience grows suspicious as to why nothing has been stabbed directly downwards into the box, the magician subverts expectations by making one final insertion. He plunges a spear straight down, making avoiding the person inside the box seem impossible. But then the spears are removed and the assistant emerges miraculously unharmed. So what gives? Well, the key to this trick is the assistant, who must lay as flat as possible inside the box, underneath two strong rubber flaps concealed along the box's base. These flaps redirect incoming spears that get too close, and sometimes a protective vest is also worn for additional protection. The final downward-driven spear is slammed through the box slower than the others, giving the assistant time to flip onto their back and see where it's coming from. Then they can maneuver themselves to dodge it or, if absolutely necessary, subtly change its course. Finally, the assistant climbs out and the box is opened up to reveal no trickery inside. With the protective rubber flaps covered in a cardboard layer, no one suspects a thing. When your parents tell you never to play with fire, most people listen. David Blaine never got that memo. His mom probably has a heart attack every time he tells her what he's going to do next. And this trick sure is a doozy. In the 2025 series, Do Not Attempt, Blaine takes on classic and terrifying fire stunts that still get crowds oohing and eyeing. In Brazil, he meets a couple of daredevils who love setting themselves alight. For the thrill, the dare, or maybe because they're cold, who knows. But the real secret behind the fire tricks isn't the flames, it's what's underneath them. Protective clothing is essential, and Blaine suits up in fire-retardant jeans to see how long he can stand the heat. He makes it look effortless, like a human piece of kindling. But there are strict rules. The smoke is toxic, burns can be severe, and the moment the fire hits, he has to hold his breath and keep his eyes shut. Why? Because flames near the eyes can cause instant blindness. Stunt professionals use specialized fire-retardant gels or pastes when a person's skin or clothing will be set alight. These gels are often based on super-absorbent polymers that can soak up thousands of times their weight in water, forming a thick, water-rich gel. When flames hit the gel, the water absorbs the heat first, which helps protect the skin underneath for a short period. He also tries his sleeve and managed to last 13 seconds. Doesn't sound very long, I know, but he came away with burns on his arms. Now, if you thought that was absolutely nuts, his finale will have you in a tailspin. After training with specialist high divers, he jumps off a 59-foot bridge whilst his body is engulfed in flames. Now, the conditions have to be just right for this kind of trick. Winds can't be too high, as it may throw Blaine off course and whip the flames into his face. He also has a time limit, only 20 seconds to walk to the jumping point, step off the bridge, and extinguish the flames in the water below, before his entire body starts to seriously burn. Thankfully, he makes it by the skin of his teeth, in an astonishing feat, one that even seasoned professionals would probably pee their pants just thinking about attempting. There are few better tricks for keeping audiences on the edge of their seats than using a katana to chop a pineapple in half on top of somebody's head, especially when the magician's blindfolded. Typically, this trick sees the magician wrapping several layers of white gauze over their eyes, followed by a wrapping of black tape, and then finally metal foil. They then have a volunteer stand up front of them, pineapple on head, and put on a show of locating them by extrasensory powers. Then, chop. Right on the mark, the pineapple is cut clean in half without any decapitations. This jaw-dropping trick is deceptively simple. It just involves a little sleight of hand. When the magician is wrapping their head, they leave the tape looser than it looks. This means that as they wrap the sheet of foil around their head, they can subtly pull the gauze and tape down below their eyes. As for the foil itself, there are two options. The magician can use metal foil with tiny holes in it, invisible to the audience, that allow just enough light through to see. Or they can use one-sided silver window film, which acts like a one-way mirror. For the latter option, the magician initially shows the audience two of these one-way film sheets pressed together back to back, so that they look like regular foil. But when they're placed onto the head, one sheet is pulled farther around so it separates from the other one, allowing the magician to see through. With their vision obstructed, they're able to line up their shot and strike the pineapple, which is usually pre-cut almost all the way through. This means it stays in one piece right until a strike is delivered, so that it'll break cleanly and realistically, as long as the magician follows the strike through convincingly. The katana doesn't even need to be sharp. Spectacular and safe. A staple of kids' parties worldwide, the balloon swallow is a cool-looking trick that doesn't actually require any swallowing at all. The secret is to take an uninflated balloon and pierce it all the way through near the end, twice with a needle, creating 4 tiny holes. This will still allow the balloon to be inflated, as the air will only leak out slowly. And once it's fully inflated, the performer presses the pierced end against their tongue and begins pushing the balloon into their mouth, rolling it into itself, but to make it as small as possible. And as it deflates, careful body positioning creates the illusion of it being swallowed. Sometimes the performer will even bring the balloon back out, reinflated. Now, this usually involves slyly swapping the deflated balloon for another, partially inflated balloon that's small enough to hide in the hand during the swap. This new balloon will also be pre-pierced, so that when the magician creates an airtight seal with their mouth, they can subtly inflate it by blowing air into the tiny holes. Other magicians use small pumps hidden in their sleeves to inflate balloons on the other end. These are easy to conceal, as the trick draws attention to their mouth instead. Balloon swallowing is an impressive trick, but don't try it with a blocked nose. Otherwise, you may inadvertently swallow the balloon for real. In Do Not Attempt, David Blaine meets an Indian strongman who looks like he was carved out of a boulder. Now, not many tricks are terrifying enough to scare stuntmen, but this one is so dangerous it can be fatal. The trick involves placing your head on a pile of bricks with one person holding an axe against the back of your neck, steel side down. Then a second person swings a hammer hard to hit the handle. When they hit the handle, the idea is the force and reverberations would go through the head to break the bricks below. Now bear in mind, the human skull can withstand approximately 1,500 pounds of force until it breaks. And let's just say a standard sledgehammer, which can weigh 10 pounds, is swung at 25 miles per hour. This could deliver 500 to 1,000 pounds of impact force, and that's a low blow, if you pardon the pun. Whilst he did successfully break the bricks below, he reported just 30 seconds later a tingling in his body came over him. When he went to the doctors, they told him straight up, "Never perform that stunt again, you fool. You'll die." Or that's how I imagine it went anyway. Yet, this scrape with doom didn't stop him from performing other daring feats. He taught Blaine how to smash glass bottles using only his fist. A beer bottle can sustain up to 136 pounds of force. A punch from an average human fist, excluding your Muhammad Ali's and Mike Tyson's, can generate 150 to 250 pounds of force. So it's certainly doable, though it'll leave you with big ouchies afterwards. The big dude explained that the blow has to be strong and fast at full power, hitting the middle part of the bottle without any tension in the hand. Blaine doesn't quite achieve the full break at first, but then delivers a confident punch that shatters the glass to pieces. Honestly, watching that was so cringy, but I swear my hand felt that punch. There are two ways to approach the classic magic trick of swallowing swords. The first, and less impressive, is to use a gimmick sword. These look real to the audience, but are designed to roll up against the tongue when pressure is applied. Kind of like those bracelets that roll up when you slap them against your wrist. While this can look effective, the top professionals swallow swords for real, but not in the same way you or I swallow food. The delicate process involves relaxing the inside of your throat and carefully positioning the body to ensure a clear passage. Years of practice are required to learn how to relax the upper esophageal sphincter, a normally involuntary muscle at the top of your esophagus, and suppress the gag reflex. Not to mention learning to perfectly align the body so as to avoid any damage to the delicate linings inside. Total calm must be maintained throughout the process of pushing it down and pulling it out. Even a shaky hand could damage not just your esophageal lining, but also your heart and lungs, as the sword moves within millimeters of them. And while very few of the tricks in this video are safe to try, sword swallowing in particular is best left to the pros. The sawing a woman in half trick has been a staple of magic shows since the 1800s, and possibly even earlier. It usually goes something like this. A willing participant lays down inside a long wooden box. The box lid is closed, and the magician, using a saw blade of some kind, cuts the assistant in half. But there's no gore. She isn't in agony, and somehow she's still able to move her feet. She's even able to do so when the two halves of the box are moved apart from each other. But how? Well, it's quite simple, really. When the assistant lays down in the box, it isn't their legs coming out the other side. What? Another accomplice is already lying in wait down at the bottom, legs pulled close to their body, ready to extend them out when the first person climbs in. The first assistant tucks their legs under themselves or pulls them up to their chest, clearing the center of the box, ready for cutting through. After the cutting, two metal blades are usually inserted into the box and presented as a demonstration that the two halves are separated. But what those plates really do is cover the inside of each half of the box from view, so no one can see in when they're pulled apart. Modern magicians have built on top this idea by setting the trick in a classic way, only to lower the walls of the box before the cutting begins. In this version, instead of lying on their back, the assistant lies on their front. This allows them to tuck their knees under their body into a hidden compartment inside the table while the walls of the boxes are still up. The assistant providing the legs, meanwhile, is squeezed into the right side of the table. This is made possible by the sloping shape of the table, which against a black background looks much thinner than it actually is. After the saw blade comes down, the two halves can be pulled apart for a striking effect. Some magicians take this idea one step further by appearing to walk along while cut in half. This is pretty creepy to witness, but it's just a matter of body positioning. The illusion is created by twisting their body around inside a specially prepared outfit, usually fitted with metal support frames to help them balance and to lessen the strain from crouching. It's a fantastic reimagining of the classic cut-in-half scenario, but just like its predecessor, it's all in the legs. I love a good martial arts flick, but do people actually break wood and shatter glass like they do in the movies? Well, shockingly, yes, and it's not magic, it's mastery. In Do Not Attempt, Blaine meets an Indian magician with a tolerance for pain that makes the rest of us look like drama queens. I throw a fit if I get a paper cut, but this guy, he can smash glass on his head and jump into piles of it like he's on a trampoline park. It looks insane, but there's a lot that goes into it. The positioning of the head, the angle of the swing, and a hard, controlled shock that makes the glass shatter cleanly instead of breaking into random shards that slice you. The trick is learning to absorb the impact without flinching. This is akin to Muay Thai fighters or Shaolin monks who train their bodies over time to ignore pain and strike with perfect precision. And even David Blaine, the king of the impossible, was stumped by this stunt. His swing was just a fraction off, the bottle didn't break cleanly, and the glass subsequently cut him. The trick clearly proves that the line between skill and stupidity is very thin. Impressive? Absolutely. Attemptable? Well, not unless you enjoy hospital waiting rooms. Among the incredible spectacles Belgian magician Aaron Crow delivers, one in particular stands out. It involves apples, bows, and arrows. And as you'll see, some very clever deception. First, the magician takes an apple, cuts out the core, and places a ring inside, before slotting the core back in. Then he selects a participant to stand in the center of the stage, holding the apple propped upon a tray atop their head. Toward the back of the stage, the magician unveils a target and hints that he can shoot through the apple and hit the target. And much to the audience's surprise, Crow does exactly that. The apple splits as the arrow shoots through it and lands right in the middle of the target. But most amazing of all, it's revealed that as the arrow passed through the apple, it retrieved the ring, pinning it against the target board. Seems too good to be true, right? Well, that's because it is, and here's how. To start with, a big one, the arrow isn't real. It's actually a piece of elastic that looks like an arrow being pulled taut. But as soon as it's released, it's pulled inside the bow, hiding it away. At the moment that occurs, a remote-activated mechanism swings a knife previously hidden inside the tray holding the apple, moving too fast to easily see. That knife is on a hinge and slices straight through the apple, making it look like the arrow passed through it. Then from a concealed slit in the target board, a spring-loaded arrow is released, moving outward, giving the impression that the arrow has just landed on the board. Now, how does the ring end up on the target board arrow? Well, almost immediately after placing it inside the apple, Aaron pushes the ring out the other side using the core, sneakily taking it back into his hand. When he unveils the target, he subtly secures the ring onto the concealed arrow, ready for it to pop up later. With the level of creativity that goes into the trick, the explanation is arguably just as interesting as the trick itself. Now, do you agree? Let me know in the comments section below. Now, if you're squeamish, this one might be a good one to look away for. Debus is a brutal martial art from Banten, Indonesia, and it makes the most dangerous magic tricks look like cheap party illusions. This isn't fake blood or clever sleight of hand. It's been practiced since the 16th century, and it's painfully real. Armed with machetes, needles, knives, and other sharp objects, performers willingly stab, slice, and pierce their own bodies. Tongues, arms, feet, stomachs, nothing's off limits. They're not just playing with fire metaphorically either. Some practitioners eat hot coals, breathe flames, and even chew on nails like it's a light snack. So why on earth would anyone do this? Debus isn't about shock value, it's deeply tied to religion and ritual, involving prayers, chanting, and music. One practitioner explained that during the chants, their bodies are blanketed by an invisible, subtle energy that protects them. Comforting, right up until someone brings out a blade the size of your forearm. It's no surprise that there have been serious injuries in the past. In fact, in 2017, a group of men were hospitalized after rinsing their hands in acid. They were following instructions from a self-described Divas master who claimed he could make them indestructible. How they managed to deal with such pain is truly a mystery, even when we know they've conditioned themselves mentally and physically to endure it. David Blaine himself watched a Divas performance and attempted to eat nails, a bold move because his throat was sore for days. That's what you get when you play with the big leagues. And while some tricks rely on big, explosive spectacles, others keep audiences on the edge of their seat by creating a real sense of fear for the magician's safety. That's exactly the case with swallowing razors trick pioneered by Japanese magician Tanba. His nail-biting performance involves first swallowing several razor blades, which he demonstrates are real by getting a volunteer to cut paper with one on stage beforehand. After swallowing the first batch, he shows the audience his tongue to prove they're gone down the hatch, before grabbing a handful of about a dozen more. To the audience's horror, he swallows all of those too, and washes them down with a shot of green absinthe. Finally, he pops a load of red string in his mouth, moves it around inside, and then delivers the impossible. He pulls the end of the string, and out it comes, threaded through over a dozen razor blades, all at perfectly spaced intervals. It's an incredible trick, but did he really swallow all those blades and tie them to the string inside his own body? Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how squeamish you are, the answer is no. The first few razor blades Tanba appears to swallow are indeed real, though likely blunted to stop the trick being too dangerous. When his volunteer cuts a piece of paper to demonstrate the blade's sharpness, he pulls the paper tight, so even a blunted blade slices through easily. Then, when the first few blades are placed into his mouth, he makes a big show of swallowing them, but actually he moves them into one of his cheeks. As for the huge later handful of blades, well, he subtly moves them to his other cheek. These new blades aren't sharp at all. They're actually gimmick blades designed for the purpose and are completely safe. When he takes a sip of the bright green absinthe, which is likely just water with food coloring, he sneakily spits out the real blades. And thanks to the coloration of the liquid and the semi-opacity of the glass, only the most perceptive audience member would be able to spot the blades now in the bottom. When Tanba puts the string in his mouth, he actually shifts it to his upper lip. The string the audience sees threaded through the blades has actually been tied to them the whole time, just hidden from sight behind his fingers when he put the fake blades into his mouth. Truly masterful deception. Now that's what I call a sharp trick. If you've ever wondered what it would feel like to wear a living, buzzing scarf, David Blaine has the answer. This trick is called bee bearding, and is as nerve-wracking as it looks. To create a bee beard, the first step is to capture the queen bee, cage her, and hang her around your neck. And then you block your ears and nose with cotton or fabric so the bees don't crawl into your most sensitive places. An assistant shakes a whole swarm out of a hive onto the body, and the bees naturally cluster around the shoulders, head, and chest, swarming once again around their queen. This is because the queen has a pheromone which attracts the rest of them. Key is to stay calm, still, and quiet. No sudden movements, no coughing, sneezing, or scratching. You see, any jolt can turn the swarm from perfectly calm into instant buzzy nightmare. The trick is made even harder because it's important not to breathe on them if they're near your nose or mouth. This is due to the carbon dioxide we expel from exhaling, which bees don't like. The risks are obvious. A barrage of stings could come your way if you mess up even a little. If you're not allergic, 10 to 20 bee stings may require hospitalization, as they can cause severe reactions from their toxic venom. In fact, he received over 10 stings himself. 1,000 bee stings, however, could be fatal, which is why Blaine is one very brave man indeed. Yeah, when it comes to this stunt, I'm minding my own business. Another trick that strikes worry into the hearts of the audience is the impaled illusion. This trick involves an assistant seemingly defying the laws of physics by being balanced on the point of a sword. Often the effect is emphasized by the magician spinning their assistant around, which somehow doesn't skewer the assistant like a shish kebab. That is until all of a sudden the assistant jolts downward and the blade of the sword bursts through their belly. The assistant appears dead and the magician gives them another spin to prove the sword's gone straight through. But then, to the audience's relief, the magician lifts their assistant off of the blade and they come back to life right as rain, without a gaping hole in their torso. But how? Well, the secret to this trick lies in the assistant's outfit. Usually concealed into a fluffy top, the assistant wears a corset with a sturdy plate built into the back, featuring a port where the sword's tip can lock into place. When the time's right, the sword partially retracts down into a hidden base, appearing to puncture the assistant's back. Meanwhile, in the front of the corset, a spring-loaded telescoping pole extends out when activated, making it look like the sword is penetrated straight through. When it's time to pull the assistant free, it's the same process in reverse, with the assistant usually pressing the spring-loaded sword tip back into their corset. Most extreme variations of the trick utilize huge rotating drills that appear to burrow through the assistant's chest. This one's a little different, as it involves the performer being strapped to an apparatus in front of the drill with the front of their body covered from sight. While the performer's body is hidden, a fake drill tip, which spins mechanically in sync with the big drill, is secured to the front of the performer's costume, usually magnetically. Then they're locked into the drill tip behind them with the same reinforced corset backplate as the classic impaled illusion. When the drill appears to continue spinning into the performer's body, it's actually being retracted into its base. While the performer presses against the cover in front of them, it makes it look like the drill has passed through him and then through the cover. As the final spectacle, the performer is lifted into the air by the drill and spun around before being lowered, and then covered again. After the covering is removed, the drill is miraculously retracted from their body, or in other words, the assistants sneakily carried it away under the cloth while the audience was distracted in amazement. Over the past few years, various performers have taken to performing one scary-looking trick that appears to use power tools in a totally inappropriate manner. This trick involves pressing a running drill against their head for an uncomfortably long time and somehow avoiding damaging themselves. But the reason they don't sustain damage is simple. The performers use flattened drill bits that are completely blunt, meaning they can't grip or tear the skin. While these drills are spinning, the performers tense up their arms and use the intense facial expressions to create a big show of pressing hard against their temples. But despite how it looks, they really only press very lightly, meaning there's absolutely no risk of hurting themselves. Some take it a step further by sticking the drill up their nose or down their throat, which, unlike the rest of the act, is actually mostly real. They use the same principles as sword swallowers to align their esophagus for a smooth, safe movement. However, while the drill never actually spins during this more dangerous part of the trick, they usually accompany it with some sound effects to make it seem like it does. Seems a little unnecessary, but maybe magicians are required to meet a minimum number of deceptions per act that the rest of us don't know about. Either way, it shouldn't need to be said, but even if you think your drill is a little blunt, don't try this at home. If race car driving is about control, spinning is about flirting with disaster at full throttle. In Do Not Attempt, David Blaine heads to South Africa to discover the incredibly chaotic art of spinning. What's spinning, I hear you ask? Well, it's a motorsport that looks less like racing and more like an accident caught in slow motion. Drivers floor it in tight circles at high speed, with tires screeching, smoke everywhere, and audiences absolutely eating it up. But it's not just about the driving. Performers climb out of moving cars to strike poses and pull daredevil stunts, turning it into a circus-like spectacle. The more daring, the better. To take your spinning game up a level, some of the bravest, or well, most unhinged drivers casually hang upside down out of car windows. Yeah, swinging just millimeters from the ground whilst going nearly 40 miles per hour. The sport originated during the apartheid era in the 1980s, a turbulent period of racial persecution and segregation. People would steal cars and use them to show off skills, status, and sometimes to honor the lives of the recently deceased. Over time, it's become somewhat of a major sport and a symbol of celebration in Black South African culture. Any car can take part, but classic BMWs are a fan favorite, probably because they're sturdy enough to survive the abuse. There are no seatbelts, no margin for error, and if something goes wrong, well, you're screwed. Spinning on the streets in unorganized events is, unsurprisingly, illegal. But the country has embraced the sport, and official events take place on racetracks. Naturally, Blaine couldn't just stand there and watch. Along with several others, he manages to pull off one of the most dangerous moves you can pull in spinning: two people hanging out the window at once. Miraculously, they execute it in style. And I'm sitting here wondering how they didn't lose their dang heads. It feels less like a sport and more like something your crazy friend would dare you to do whilst drunk. In any case, it's a very good reminder why Blaine's show is called Do Not Attempt. While most tricks could be performed by anyone with a good bit of cash to invest in the materials, this one is more complicated. Not because it breaks any laws of physics or anything, but because it requires a very unique type of assistant. Pioneered by illusionist Kevin James, this trick abruptly sends a nutty scientist chainsawing his white-coated assistant in half while he's wheeling a table on stage. All in plain sight with no apparent concealment, the scientist character then props up his assistant's severed torso and spins it around, while it moves its hands, proving that it's very much alive. But then somehow the legs begin to move too, despite being separated. To complete the effect, the torso then lifts itself up, and the scientist runs his hand underneath, proving its lower body is truly detached, not just hidden somewhere. Then the torso is placed into the lower platform where the legs walk themselves off stage. Another assistant reappears, carrying the legs back over, and places them behind the torso. Then the legs and torso are wheeled off stage while the scientist ominously presents a staple gun to the audience. The legs and torso come back on again, and before the audience can catch a breath, the mad scientist staples the legs and torso together, which then stand up and dance. Pretty crazy stuff, with an equally crazy explanation. This trick is made possible due to the fact that the role of torso is taken on by someone who genuinely has no lower body. Turning an unfortunate disfigurement into a source of amazement, they're wheeled on and perched atop the legs. Those legs belong to a full-size person whose upper body is hidden away inside the table. And this explains how the legs and upper body are able to move separately after the dummy chainsaw passes between them. When the legs walk themselves off stage, an assistant reappears carrying a pair of fake legs in identical trousers and prop them up behind the torso. Then when the legs and torso are temporarily wheeled off, they're swapped for another surgical mask-wearing assistant of vaguely similar appearance in an identical outfit. The switched surgical mask assistant positions themselves in a way that looks like they're still cut in half before switching positions to lie on their back, ready for the reassembly celebration dance. Whew! After all that crazy magic, I think we can all take a very well-earned bow. Do you know any magician's secrets of your own? Next, check out my video Dumbest Viral TikTok Trends. Thanks for watching.